Now that people are disappointed that their rapture expectations have failed quite spectacularly, now they have gone back to the fallback position of, after all, no one knows the day or the hour, and Jesus will come like a thief in the night, so it is impossible for anyone to ever know when Jesus is coming. Is that true? First and foremost, let me tell you, that is the farthest thing from the truth. The statement, no one knows the day or the hour, is found in Matthew 24, verse number 36. It is in the middle of a particular context. You cannot just take a verse out of its context and make it to mean whatever you want to make it to mean. The statement that no one knows the day or the hour is after Jesus says, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. So the day and the hour was to be within the generation of the signs he had been giving. So therefore, to say that it is impossible to know when Jesus was to come is a cop-out. Jesus said clearly that he was going to come in the generation in which the temple, which stood in Jerusalem in 30 AD, was destroyed. That temple was destroyed in 70 AD. That's when Jesus was to come back. That's when Jesus came back, exactly as he said, exactly how he said he would come back. Now, when you come to the other statement where they say, oh, Jesus is to come back like a thief in the night, therefore it's impossible to know, you just need to be ready. That's not what the Bible says. The Bible says in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 that he would come like a thief in the night to the wicked. The wicked would not know. But Paul tells the Thessalonians, but you are not of the night, you are not wicked, so that day can come to you like a thief in the night. In fact, he tells them, you know about that day. You know when that day is. Because Jesus had been teaching Matthew 10:23 before the 12 apostles were done going to the towns of Israel. The Son of Man will come in the lifetime of the 12. Matthew 16:27 and 28, the Son of Man is going to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, and then he will recompense every man for what he has done. Truly, I say to you, there are some people standing here today in 30 AD that will not have died when the Son of Man comes in his kingdom. In Matthew 23, Jesus told the Pharisees, woe unto you, Pharisees and scribes, you have killed all the prophets. You are now going to kill my servants, the apostles, so that on you may come the judgment of all the blood that has been shed upon the earth since the time of Abel up to the time of Zechariah the son of Berechiah. And then he says in verse number 36 of Matthew 23, truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until this judgment takes place, the final judgment of the old covenant. When you go over to Matthew 26, when Jesus is standing before the Sanhedrin, before the high priest asks him, tell us, are you the Son of the living God? I adjure you by the living God. And Jesus replies, he says, you have said it, but I tell you. Now pay attention to these words. But I tell you, high priest, I tell you, Sanhedrin, who is about to crucify me, from now on, you will see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. I urge you to go back to these passages and read them again. Jesus explicitly, repeatedly, consistently taught that he was going to come back in the generation of his original disciples in the first century. The Apostle Paul confirms it in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 in the very famous rapture passage. It is not a rapture passage, it is a second coming passage. How do we know it's a second coming passage? Because it says so. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 verse 15, Paul says, with this we declare to you by a word from the Lord, that we who are alive, who are left alive until the second coming of the Lord, will not precede those who are already dead. So Paul confirms what Jesus said. He says, we who are alive. He's talking about himself. He's talking about Silas and Timothy. We who are alive, present tense, who are left alive, according to the word of the Lord. Paul is quoting Matthew 16, verse 28. because Paul and the Thessalonians were alive at the same time as those who were standing there in the already quoted passage of Matthew 16:28. Jesus and his apostles said that Jesus was coming back in the first century. 1 Peter 4:7, the end of all things is at hand. Peter is writing about 62 AD. The end of all things was about to take place. What all things? The all things that pertain to the old covenant system. That is what was ending. That is what the last days were about. 1 John chapter 2, John, one of the 12 disciples, writes in verse number 18, children, it is the last hour. How could it be the last hour back in 65 AD when John is writing this? Well, it was the last hour because that's what Jesus had been telling them. And John says, we know it is the last hour because many antichrists have come, as you have heard. And now the main antichrist is about to come. And the end is at hand. Paul said that the man of lawlessness was alive. And you know what is restraining him now, he says. In 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. The man of lawlessness was alive in Paul's time. And Paul says that the man of lawlessness is going to take his seat in the temple of God, just as Jesus had prophesied in Mark 13, verse number 14. That when you see the abomination of desolation standing where he ought not to be, the man of lawlessness must be killed in the Jerusalem temple before it is destroyed, as prophesied by Jesus in Matthew 24, in Mark 13, in Luke 21. Both, actually not both, but in Mark and in Matthew and in Luke, Jesus says that all the things prophesied in the Olivet prophecy were to take place before that generation passed away. It all took place as scheduled, exactly as prophesied. So, to say that it is impossible for believers to know when the day would be is a cop-out and just contrary to all the scriptures. Because when Jesus appears to John at the island of Patmos about 65 AD, because that's when Revelation was written, he tells him, tell them these are the things that are about to take place. The Son of Man is about to come and every eye will see him. Those things were about to take place when John wrote Revelation. The 7 churches were to see Jesus coming back. The 7 churches existed in the first century at 65 AD. So, I understand you may not have heard about this before. I understand you've been conditioned, programmed to think that the second coming must always be in your future, but that's not what the Bible says. The only way you think that the second coming is in your future is because you have ignored the explicit, repeated, consistent statements of Jesus. Not because it's your fault. That's how you have been taught. That's how you have been conditioned. That's how I was taught. That's how I was conditioned. But when I discovered the truth, I went back, I cleared the board, and I started reading again. And I found out all these verses that I've shared with you in these last few minutes. I challenge you, go and look at them again. Go and look at Matthew 10:23. Look and see who he's talking to. Look at Matthew 16:27, 28. Look at Matthew 23:29 to 38. Look at Matthew 24, verse 1 up to verse, actually I go to the end. Look at Matthew 26, 62 to 64. You will find that they are all saying the same thing consistently. Jesus was to return in the first century in a spiritual way. Luke 17, verse number 20. Examine it again. Don't be deceived again. Come into the light. Come into the truth. God desires for his people to know the truth and to walk in the truth. God bless you so much as you seek the truth and, most importantly, find it and possess it and walk in it in Jesus' mighty name.